I am Anthony from Hasselsnet, and you're watching 10 Questions. Today I'm here with Daniel Protoman Arseneault from the Transformers Slag podcast. I will ask 10 questions about his experience as a YouTuber, as well as what led him onto that path. Hi, Daniel.
How you doing?
Horrible. Anyway, I have 10 questions to ask you.
I think we're doing this all very last second, so I could only imagine.
Anyway, I have 10 questions to ask you that I more or less ask anyone, but adjusted specifically for you. If at any time your responses leave an opening, I may ask a follow-up question. Are you ready to begin?
I am ready.
Okay, so question number 1 is, what entertained you while growing up?
Ooh, that's a loaded one. One of my very first memories of any kind of television was WWF wrestling. I was born in 1983, and in 1986, that's like when it really hit its stride, really just kind of went crazy, Hulkamania and stuff. And those were some of my very first memories of anything entertainment. And obviously, any kid of the 80s and 90s, you know, the be lucky part of that era, toys and action figures and great cartoons and the boom of Nintendo into Super Nintendo and the console wars and the comic book speculator boom of the 90s with Jim Lee. I'm actually wearing it right now, Jim Lee, X-Men. You know, like, I was a very lucky kid to be part of all of that, and it was all inspirational to me. I can't pick one thing because it was like a sensory overload of all the great stuff that was available around that time.
So Transformers not huge for you?
Oh, of course. Of course. My first experience with Transformers was I had a neighbor who I was friends with that was 2 years older than me. So he was like the older kid that everything he did, I did. And him and his mom were going to go see this movie in theaters. And I didn't know what the movie was, but if he was going to go see it, I was going to go see it. How bad could it be? You know? So I went to go see it, and it was Transformers, the movie, the 1986 movie. Saw it in my theater across the street from my house. It was like the one theater in our area. And after seeing that movie, came home, went to my dad, and I'm like, I want that red and yellow robot, which was Hot Rod. And it's, you know, because I guess back then, the memory was foggy of the names of the characters, because it's like, you know, you don't even know what Transformers are, and now you just saw the 86 movie. Optimus Prime dies, and you don't even care about that because who's Optimus Prime to you? You know, the way I compare it to is if you saw Star Wars for the first time, and Obi-Wan dies, and it isn't that big a deal because you care about Luke Skywalker and his journey. That's kind of how I approached Transformers as a kid, because I didn't know who Optimus Prime was. When he died, he was Obi-Wan dying, and the Luke Skywalker Hot Rod, what's his adventure? And what's going on with that guy? So when I finished the movie, I went back to my French-Canadian dad, and I'm like, I want the red and yellow robot. He went to this like closeout toy store across the street from our house, and he came back with Blaster. So he wasn't wrong. He's still a yellow and red robot. Probably got it cheaper too because it was the closeout stuff, and it was 1985 Blaster. But that's kind of my humble beginnings with Transformers, and then it just dominoed from there when I got the internet in 95, because Beast Wars came out not long after that. I had the internet back in 95, so that was the beginning of the online Transformers fandom, which I was a big part of in those early years. And I mean, if you look behind you, it's still going strong, kind of crazy.
Okay. So what made you decide to start a YouTube channel? Now, I know you do the Transformers Slag podcast, which also, there's an audio version online somewhere, I assume, because it's a podcast. Yeah. So which did the audio version come first, or the YouTube channel, or is it simultaneous?
So I did a YouTube channel. How I got into YouTube was I obviously had a YouTube account when it first started, and there, you know, the early days of YouTube, they used to have replies. Like they used to be able to do a reply video. And I used to do reply videos, just those, in its early infancy back in 2008. And I had a different channel called Proto Retro, which was like my dumping ground for my replies. And whenever I would go to a convention, if I recorded footage. And then I just started doing toy reviews just for fun, but I used it more as an educational experience, where if I got a brand new toy, I would use it to talk about the history of Shockwave, not just because it's a masterpiece Shockwave and stuff. And I found a lot of success with that. Easily. I think like within like the 4 years of doing it, I went up to like 8,000 subscribers easily. But to me, my heart wasn't in that, because I almost felt like it was too easy, the views. Like I'd review a Rescue Bots toy and I'd get 1 million views, and I'd just be like, nah, man, that's the, like, to me, I wanted more to do educational kind of material, because a lot of the other YouTube creators that I respected, they weren't part of the Transformer world. They were like part of the wrestling world or the video game world. And I liked their content, how it was more educational based, talking about history. And Transformers is an amazing brand when it comes to history. It's like the Civil War, because you have like each character has his own story as it goes through. And you have all these individual faces. So I wanted to do something that was more educational, but at the same time, I was doing a podcast in 2009 called the Canadian Slag Podcast, which was Canadian based. And the individuals that I did the podcast with over the years, they kind of disappeared from the fandom. And so I just kind of took it, brought it in a new direction that was more international. And then I found that more people enjoyed listening to it on YouTube than even as a MP3 or a Spotify or whatever. So the YouTube version became explosive. And then when COVID happened, I started going like, hey, now I got Saturday nights free. Maybe I'll do a stream once in a while using YouTube Live. And that exploded in a different direction because people loved that. They loved it to death, where, I was getting like easily, man, like even I did one last night. I think it got like 1,700 people. And that I asked questions, and I ask questions to the audience. They ask questions back. And it's really just a discussion of what's in the world in Transformers today. And because I worked with that industry and I understand it, I have a very different take on it. Like, a lot of times people, they ask questions. Oh, why did this toy get made? Why did that toy happen? Why is this toy not being made? I have those answers because I have the logical answer to it from the industry standpoint rather than the fan standpoint. Even though I am a fan too, I understand what is the difference. And I think that that's what really gave success for my podcast, was because it was very different from what every other Transformer podcast is on the internet. And I have huge respect for guys like Radio Free Cybertron and Brian, because they were the Neil Armstrong of it. But what I do is very different from what he does. And there's room for both of us in a lot of ways, because what his podcast is different than mine.
Okay. So now you've answered a number of my questions, so I have to skip down a little bit. But what trends have you seen change with online content creation since you started your channel?
Oh, man.
There's quite a bit.
Yeah, well, again, when I started in 2008, 2009, I mean, YouTube has changed so much in terms of, I guess we'll call it a reward policy, in terms of what videos get attention and everything. What changed a lot? Now everything is all about a really good catching thumbnail, and without trying to be insulting to a majority of the mainstream audience, but something that's very simple and visual, I guess is the best way to put it. When the whole COPPA thing happened, where YouTube was cracking down on a lot of toy reviewers because of most of the child audiences that were watching it, I was not worried about that, because my podcast is literally a still image, and that's it. There's no visual to it. And if I probably put more visuals to it, would I probably have more views and more subscribers? Yeah, probably. But it also kind of keeps the people that are really there to learn something rather than to be distracted. I like it that people, like, the one thing that I hear that makes me happy is I love hearing artists that work on big properties saying that they like that they could just have the podcast on in the background. So it doesn't have to be a visual thing that they have to look over every time. And the same thing too, a lot of people with newer cars today, they listen to the YouTube version of the podcast on their car, and they don't need a visual aspect because they're driving, So I feel that that the big changes, more than anything, in my opinion, are not necessarily for the best, but they are definitely necessarily what you have to do to succeed. Okay. Like, there's a cheat sheet to YouTube. I don't like to go by it, but there is a cheat sheet to it that's easy success.
What brings people to your YouTube channel now? Now, your channel, you put out videos. Usually they're short, quick, about one topic. They're news-related generally. Then you do the live stream. Which one do you think, or maybe both, do people come to your channel to actually just sit there and watch or listen to?
Well, I have a dedicated audience that'll probably watch regardless of what I talk about, but it really is dictated by what's going on in the world with Transformers. I mean, if there's bots news tomorrow, I'm going to talk about it, and because I'd like to say well versed in the world of Transformers, I could give my opinion, and my opinion is usually half business and half fan, where I'll give my fan opinion of it, but also the business side of it in terms of trademarks and patents and what's going on, and from timing and how it works with the 4-year licensing and everything like that. There's so many different layers that people don't think about. Like when you see like a weird bludgeon repaint, and people go like, "Oh, why did they do that? That's so stupid." And people don't realize, well, Bludgeon's trademark was going to expire and they need to refresh it, but they have no intention of using Bludgeon in any future product or TV series or movie, but they have to put out something because the trademark has to be used, because if they don't use it within 4 years, they get fined by the United States Trade. It's super deep. And so it gets to a point where it's like, I bring that to the podcast and it's something different. And people really like that. Where the live stream, which I do I try to do every Saturday, that's just me going 2 hours nonstop, just answering questions. And that's just more free range. That's just people going like, what's your favorite, topping on a hot dog sometimes. Even it's not even Transformer related sometimes. They'll just ask silly stuff too. But that's what happens when you build an audience and they love what you do. Sometimes you could kind of go off the rails. And because I'm not a person that's just Transformers, I do a lot of other stuff, video games and 90s toys and everything. I'm all part of these different worlds. I don't mind talking about those, and people like to talk about it. We all cross-pollinate with all these different hobbies. We're not just one note, so it's easy to kind of do that stuff.
Okay. So what changes do you have planned for your YouTube channel in the near future? New features? Are you going to go and do some? Are you going to do like, because you don't do the typical review thing either. No. Yeah, you kind of are all about the news and answering people's questions.
It was funny because YouTube contacted me because my other channel that was partnered with them, they said, you haven't done anything in 2 years on this channel. You need to do something on the channel, otherwise we're going to turn off partnership. So I literally just did a YouTube toy review out of spite on that channel, just for the hell of it. But in terms of what I have planned, not much really. I'm just going to go where the wind takes me. And I mean, it's the same thing. Like when COVID happened, there was no intention of doing live streams. Like the live stream thing happened because, I got Saturday nights free now. There's nowhere I could go, hang out at a restaurant, hang out with friends, go to a sporting event. So it's just kind of like, let's turn on that camera and start talking. And it was a blessing in disguise. It was something where people absolutely loved it. And I mean, what else I could really do is kind of difficult, because I just, hey, the news hits, I talk about it. That's about it, really.
Okay. So the next question is, let us say that anything is possible. What changes would you like to make if you had unlimited resources?
Oh, if I had unlimited resources, I used to always talk about this. Like, I would quit my job, build a studio, and literally do this like long form. I would love it that it's something that if I didn't have a job, I could wake up in the morning, go to the podcast studio and have someone that I could play off of. I used to have someone on the podcast, but it was very difficult to work our times together. So it would be something where I'd love to have it where I could like literally talk about all geek news for 2 hours every morning and cover everything. That would be like a dream scenario, and have it in like, a nice acoustic podcast kind of room. And it could be like something I could really 100% dedicate myself. Part of the success that I have with this podcast is, and like you mentioned, the short form is I could go to work, come home, read the news, bang out something in 10 minutes, upload it. And it's a lot easier to do that if you have a good schedule and if you're very dedicated to it. And I don't come home like, oh my God, I'm so exhausted, but sometimes that could happen. But, the point is that kind of form of podcast works for my lifestyle. And if I had unlimited resources, everything would change in terms of the format, for sure.
Okay, so now we're going to move into some talking points. Now, as I told you before we went on, there was a conversation earlier this week on the public Discord that Transformers Reviewers uses, and it was about who toy theft actually hurts. Now, I was asked by a couple of people to kind of put my opinion out there, since I have intellectual property right education in law. So I did, and I tried to make this as layman as possible, or as lay. And so I have 6 points here. I'm going to read off the points, and then you can add in what you think. So point number 1 was toy theft hurts the consumer. Shrinkage over time contributes to the increase in prices. Enough shrinkage can also cause Hasbro to change manufacturers, and that may also increase prices. And that specifically cites the supply disappearing off the belts in a factory, but also we're talking about store shrinkage.
Well, I'll say with that one, it would have to be a significant amount of theft in order for it to really affect the prices. I mean, I do agree with you with that to a degree, but I mean, at the same time, though, unfortunately, Hasbro will always keep increasing prices. I actually did a podcast segment where I talked about how prices have increased throughout the years, factoring inflation, minimum wage, and all kinds of stuff from 1996 to present. And I literally documented everything from Beast Wars to today of how prices have changed and how the deluxe Transformer toy has terribly outpaced minimum wage and inflation, and that's all on Hasbro. And then you could go into the argument of plastics and stuff, but I went deep into that. But I mean, when it comes to like theft, though, I could see a small percentage of it affecting costs, but not too much, I would say, because where the product is right now being done in Vietnam, there isn't enough stuff being stolen to the point that it's really affecting the bottom line. It's probably like 10 of a unit, let's say, of a product that might be getting stolen. And that's not enough to affect the bottom line, because when you really think about it, of pins and plastic and ABS and vinyl and PVC, it's maybe 10 cents, so per unit, let's say. So it's not too big a deal when it comes to that. And then, of course, the paper for stickers, if they are, and chrome. But, I mean, I could go into the whole semantics of that. But the point is that one, not so much. And it's not that I'm saying that what they're doing is right, but I'm saying that's one that, little bit. Anyways, well, sorry to cut you off, though.
Oh, that's fine, because I was going to get into the second point, which Hasbro is a corporation. It has stakeholders that they must answer to. And while the thefts, as you were saying, really doesn't cost them too much of anything, if it did, they would pass the cost down to consumers. And these thefts also have the side effect of hurting the brand identity, which could contribute to overall loss in sales.
Well, when it comes to costs being brought down onto the customer, that is true. Hasbro in 2019 put out an initiative to try to make packaging costs cheaper. And on top of this whole initiative being put out, which we did see physically through the Kingdom toys, and how the bubble, I wish I had an example nearby, but the bubble of the packaging was reduced to reduce plastic costs, because that plastic window is plastic, and cardboard is cheaper. But then literally a year after that, they announced that they're going to be increasing the costs of all the MSRP for all the price points regardless. So it really is one of these things that we never get to truly enjoy any savings, because those savings are better kept for themselves internally to then tell the investors and the stockholders and everything like that, hey, look how much money we made more this year, instead of saying like, oh, we're going to give it to the consumer so they pay $1 less for Cheetor. It's a sad reality of consumerism, unfortunately, and business.
Yeah. So then point 3, there are both ethical and moral considerations with reviewers when it comes to obtaining stolen products. There are also legal ramifications, but that's a different topic. These are primarily subjective concerns, and while some people do not have them, most of the affiliates and members of Transformers reviewers do. And I actually think that's true probably of most reviewers in general. Yeah. Thus, promoting reviewers who obtain product illicitly is discouraged, at least by us, and by most. Now you have, and I'm going to link your video, which I found yesterday while you were live streaming. I was like, help me find it. I will link that in the description. but obviously you have your viewpoint on it, and we also understand, for those who have probably haven't seen it, a few weeks before this video went live, I did an interview with Gotbot, Dennis Moulton, where we talk about how in certain societies, developing nations like that, theft isn't seen the same way we see it in the United States and Canada and the UK. So go ahead and give me your insights on that one.
Well, number one, I mean, this has been a topic, and like my segment that you're referring to, it's been a topic that's been around for a while in the Transformers world. Specifically, it really started to become a public thing in 2009. Revenge of the Fallen, peak popularity of the brand, and YouTube really, reviewers really finding their place in that ecosystem, and then especially the monetary benefits that could come from that too when the partnership program started to roll out. And there was individuals, again, I don't want to name names, but there was individuals even back then that were, paying guys to steal product to be able to get it literally sometimes half a year to a year before anything would ever be seen in retail. And that was a big deal back then because people would be able to see this product manipulated, and sometimes you'd be seeing the product for the very first time, not even like Hasbro or whatever revealing photos or prototypes or anything. And that was a big deal back then. That was a really, really, really big deal because people made a lot of money. And by people, I mean not the people who stole it. The person who would steal it would steal a deluxe toy from the factory line, sell it to the reviewer for $50, when the MSRP for that toy would have been $10 back then in 2009. But then that reviewer, with that $50 investment from that stolen product, would then put the video up and get, like 300,000 views, which is definitely more than $50 back in YouTube revenue, especially the way YouTube revenue was back in 2009. So there was an incentive for them to want to do that, let alone the clout and saying like, hey, I got it first, or look how many subscribers I got. There was a monetary benefit to it too. And the long-term benefits of building an audience and everything. A lot of people that watch these reviewers today don't know how they became so big back then was because they bought stolen product. And like you mentioned before, the moral ramifications, some people, even in the Western world, don't have morals. It's do what you got to do to be successful. And the sad thing is that we still see it today. Some of them are new faces. Some of those old faces don't buy stolen stuff anymore. They've used the stolen stuff as to build a foundation for their channels. And now that their channels are huge, they don't have to do that anymore. Now they could buy retail product and review it because they have their built-in audience. But you still see it now with newer channels. And some of those new channels today, 3 of them specifically, those guys had small nothing channels, but stealing the toys was the perfect rocket boost to put their channel into stardom, if you will. And when you have a huge audience, because the reality is the toy reviewer audience, a good chunk of it, a very good chunk of it is children and or people under 18, even a 16-year-old. I'm going to call a 16-year-old a kid. And to them, they don't care if it's a stolen toy or not. They just care that they get to see Black Arachnia, right away. And they don't care about the social ramifications of it. And that's why those guys will always do well, because they know that the percentage of people that'll feel morally bad about watching it will not watch it, but that's a small 10%. But the other 90% have no problem being able to see that Sharkticon figure before everyone else and see how the articulation is and everything. So it's a sad truth, unfortunately, of why it succeeds and why it continues. I mean, it did stop at one point. And I mentioned it in the video when they moved from China to Vietnam, and they had to move factories even before that in China, from Jetta Industries and everything in China. It all disappeared magically. What a surprise. They moved factories, and that guy who was stealing stuff was geographically too far away to continue to do that. So the truth is Vietnam got smart. Someone realized there's money to be made here, and they contacted the right people who were willing to pay. And the rest is history, unfortunately. Bad history, but history nonetheless.
I did an interview with FJ DeSanto a while back, and he tells me that he goes into Hasbro Studios 2016, and they had already planned out all the way through 2022 the toys that were coming out.
Oh yeah, they plan. Like I've talked with Aaron Archer many times on my podcast, who was the former senior designer of everything Transformers, and he said that like sometimes stuff could be thrown together in 6 months. Sometimes stuff is planned years in advance, like in the long game, and especially when you're talking the movie stuff, where during its peak popularity, they were probably planning like 5 movies. You knew that they were probably planning all kinds of. And you know what? Transformer toys are very different from every other toy line. There's a lot more engineering and planning that go into it than just a face scan and a body like most other toys today. So it's a whole different story.
Okay, so on to point 4, it says, as long as you can prove purchase, which usually is showing a box, including gimmick and weapons, most people would be excited to see a review by someone who lucked out and received the product legitimately early. And we go back to something we were also talking about prior to going on was it's really hard to hide a box in a pocket when you're trying to steal from a factory.
Yeah, you just literally, like the guy that's it. It's very easy to do. And the reality is that when it comes to Hasbro, when they send out, and Hasbro does send out toys to reviewers, they do it in fancy boxes. It's like a gift box thing. Hey, here's our Kingdom thing. That's the only time Hasbro ever sends out stuff to reviewers. They do it. They actually did one not too long ago. They did a beautiful Kingdom box for all the big guys and all the websites and stuff. It was a nice little gift box and everything. But the reality is that most of the reviewers that buy the stolen product, not only do they not have the box, but a lot of times they sometimes accidentally end up with extra accessories, like a certain Black Arachnia review that really is a tell that it was a stolen product, because they should have not had that piece, because that piece was intended for something else. So down the line with that mold, let's just say. So it's something that, it gets to a point where, I mean, you can't stop them, because Hasbro is not hiring anybody to like go after these toy reviewers. They probably feel it's not worth their time and energy to pursue it. But the only reason why it could affect Hasbro in a bigger way is if they ever steal something so early that, and this was a thing that Bakhan used to have a problem with back in the day, because Bakhan used to do what was called the product preview panel, which was they would show the audience prototypes and stuff stuff that's planned for the next year. And they would ask the audience, whatever you do, please don't take photos. That's all we ask. You could talk about it afterwards with your friends and everything. It was this big thing. And Bakhan used to have this closed room. Everyone gets to see it, but please don't take photos. And the main reason for that was because they didn't want any of that design stuff to get out, let alone trademarks and everything like that, because they're worried that what if they're working on a bludgeon toy and they don't have bludgeon trademarked right now, and they show this bludgeon toy and they put it out there, and a company copies the design and trademarks bludgeon's name before Hasbro even gets a chance to, because they know Hasbro's doing it. They could stronghold them with a trademark. And that's happened in the past a lot of times. Hasbro's actually kind of guilty of it too. They did that to Bandai once. They found out that Bandai was going to be putting out a line called Machine Robo Rescue in America, and Hasbro went out of their way to trademark Machine Robo Rescue, or Robot Rescue in this case, to make sure that they don't bring it over here. And I mean, that's the big thing, is that if ever it gets to a point where a toy leaks that is so early, that to the point where you could get another company could go, oh, Hasbro's doing that, quick, let's block them, and that could be a problem. And then Hasbro, I think, will get really pissed off, because if a Black Arachnia review causes them to not even be able to use the trademark, then I think they'll come after a toy reviewer, especially. Then they'll not be happy about that, because that's something where now you got to scrap packaging, copyright, all kinds of stuff, trading cards, everything.
Oof. Because as I mentioned, I'd spent years working with Pokemon organizing events, and Nintendo, because they're so protective of the Pokemon thing. If you even produce a fake game, you don't even have to sell it. But if they think it's close to something they're about to do or something they're trying to sell, DMCA on your YouTube, they will shut down your website.
I've been to anime conventions where Nintendo would be like a guest. They'd have a booth or something, And then they would go into the artist alleys, and you'd have people that are making custom Pokemon stuff, like little balls and everything. And they literally would go to the organizers and go, if you don't clean this up, we're not coming back. Like they're really protective of their IP, and rightfully so. I mean, look, we understand they're multi-million-dollar organizations and they make tons of money. But at the end of the day, if you really simplify it and make it small, if you created something and someone was stealing it, you wouldn't be happy about it either. Millions or $5, you wouldn't be happy about it either. So, and it does affect the smaller people too, because while, yeah, some of the CEOs of Hasbro and stuff, they're just fine financially. But I'll tell you, a lot of those designers that work on the Transformer brand, they're not exactly rolling in the dough. They make normal pay, modest pay, just like a lot of the rest of us in a lot of ways. So it's something that it affects everybody, and not just rich people. People that are working 9 to 5s that make, very modest 80K to like 60K paychecks sometimes at best. These guys aren't like celebrities that are coming back home in their Ferraris after they designed a Rat Trap figure. So it doesn't work like that. But it's a misconception that people usually have, is it's a $1 million company, but not everyone's a millionaire in that company. Far from it.
Okay. So for those who are watching it, we're recording this on Memorial Day weekend. And at that point in the United States, I had, and now you feel free to update me, because we were talking about toy theft again, and was about where you would expect to see reviews from because of legitimate sightings. So as of a couple weeks ago, Kingdom Wave 3 had been seen in Australia, in the Western United States more recently. And usually if the Western United States and Australia have product, it's probably in Asia as well.
Yes.
And then somebody found in, I think it was a Walmart or a Target, a Studio Series 86 Slug, which was a weird outlier because that's awfully early, but it was reported to be in Georgia.
Well, does he have the box? We'll start with that.
He actually showed the shelf with the product on it.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is distribution when it comes to toys is a very weird thing. Japan really has it down in terms of release dates and everything, but they're also such a small country in comparison, so they're able to really schedule that very well. But when you're talking an international brand like Transformers, where that packaging, like, let me just grab something quickly, like where this packaging is going to be used for the UK market, probably the Pacific Rim Asian market, not Japan, but like, let's say China and other countries, when it's going to be used for the Canadian market, the American market, the Australian market. When you have something like that where it's going to be all over the place, it's very difficult to have like a hard and fast release date. And a lot of times stuff gets sent to distributors, and that's usually how it works, is that Hasbro doesn't directly send, a pallet of this to Walmart. It goes to distributors that then send it to all the Walmarts. And then you get into the complicated thing of, does this Walmart manager want to install, order X amount of units because Y hasn't sold out yet? And that's where it gets even more dicey. What I think happened in Australia was, I think these were called Big W's. That's the name of the store that got them. They just ordered new product, and they filled out a form, and the distributor in Australia probably had the pallets of Wave 3 stuff, and were probably told, hey, don't ship this stuff out yet, still give Wave 2, and they probably made a mistake. It's happened in the past where, as a Canadian, I remember we got all the Revenge of the Fallen product before the rest of the world at a Zellers, which is like a weird chain that we used to have in Canada back in the day. So, and it really was just a distributor mistake, because distributors get all that product and then they sit on it, and then there's street dates of what's supposed to come out when, but a lot of times stuff just gets put out there. And the truth is, with these distributors, they don't just deal with toys, they deal with a lot of stuff. And to them, it's toys. How serious business could that be in their mind? Like, it's like, oh, how much of a big deal could it be? But sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't, depending on who it is. And like I said, there's so many X factors with certain toy managers and certain aisles of Toys R Us's and Targets and Walmarts and all the different toy distributors around the world. So it gets complicated. It really does. And who gets it first, why they get it first. There's millions of different factors. But that Sharkticon, why is there only one? That's the question I would have. That's a deluxe, so that would be a case of 4. So what happened to those other ones? Was it just the one? Did a case get cracked open and another 3 fell into the fingers of fans and just disappeared and fell off the radar because no one publicly reported having these? Who knows? Who knows? Like it's really deep, that.
Okay. So the final point we had was, and this is my personal opinion here. I would like to believe that everyone we interact with is an adult. You did mention that kids do watch your videos and stuff, but
yeah,
my understanding is
not
that,
my videos. My videos actually have very low analytics for children.
Yeah,
but toy reviewers in general, it's mostly children.
Yeah, yeah, mine are not mostly children, but I would like to assume that most everybody is an adult, and then we as such we would assume there's some level of maturity where no one needs to be swearing or threatening anybody over this stuff. Because we're not the police. We're not going to actually stop you. We can't. And if you don't like someone's content, you do not have to watch it. Certainly,
yeah,
no
you
one
just
wants,
not watch it.
Right, and no one wants anyone's opinion shoved down their throat.
The one thing I always tell people is if you hate a content creator, don't hate watch them. That doesn't help either, because you're still giving them the view, you're still giving them the ad revenue. Like, the best thing you could do is just not watch it. Because if you don't watch it, that hurts them more than anything. And the only reason why they're stealing stuff is because they know people watch. The second the views stop coming in, they're going to shift elsewhere. They'll do something else. So that's it's like the old saying, voting with your dollar. In this case, you're voting with your eyeballs, and where you're putting them.
Okay. So returning to the questions, the next one is, did you wish to mention anything else about your YouTube channel or your podcast?
Not really. I'm very grateful for all the fans that I have and the people who enjoy it. I could honestly say, in terms of analytics and traffic, I'm the #1 Transformer podcast in the world. I could say that much. Looking at like Social Blade and everything like that, like we have a lot of people that enjoy our stuff. It helps that I have kind of Hasbro behind me helping out with information and stuff too, so that also is a big deal. Great sponsors that I have, like Symbiote Studios and Hasbro licensees and everything. So it's something that there's not much I can really say, except I'm thankful for everything that I have and all the fans that keep supporting me year after year after year.
Okay. So do you have content in any other outlets? How can people find out more about your content? Now, I have your Instagram as instagram.com/protomangaming. Mm-hmm. Your Twitter is twitter.com/protoman. Mm-hmm. And your YouTube is youtube.com/transformers/podcast. Mm-hmm. Now, where can people find the audio podcast?
Well, what I always tell people, like the catch-all, is you could go to theprotoman.com, which is everything that I do is pretty much there. Old stuff, retired stuff, my professional stuff that I've done with the Transformer brand, everything is there. And the only thing that's not there is, like, I also run conventions. I mean, again, I worked with BotCon for years. I worked with TFCon for years. And then I run conventions locally here in my home city of Montreal, Canada, where I run video game conventions and toy conventions. So, like, I'm a very busy human being. I do a lot of different things. I wear a lot of different hats. But, I mean, all of that is kind of just found there. You just kind of just go there, and it's a very simple website, so it's very, I guess we'll call it cell phone friendly. That way people could just kind of go there and just click onto whatever's going on, different channels, different venues, different things, different stuff that I did. I did video game streaming for a bit just for fun, just all these little things.
Okay. Well, I would like to thank you for appearing on my channel. Thank you. And
no problem.
For everybody who's watching, remember to check out Daniel's or Protoman's channel, or both. He's Daniel and Protoman. Right now, he's not in his outfit. He's not in the costume. Also, would Protoman be dressed as Rodimus Prime or Protoman from Mega Man?
Well, the funny thing is the screen name actually did come from Mega Man, which was when I first got the internet back in 95, 96. I was like, I want to have something that's something I like, but I didn't want to name myself after like a Transformer character because I don't know. I always thought, to me, it was silly to go into like a Transformer message board and call yourself Silverbolt or Rodimus.
Right.
I always found that. But like, so if you had a name from another brand, it's not. And a lot of times, still people to this day, they ask me like, "Where'd you get Protoman from?" They don't know about the Mega Man origins. They think, oh, is it prototype related, or like, do you like collecting prototypes? Which I actually do, but it's not related. I just really love the Mega Man brand. That's why. So more than anything else, and it just, I found it was a much more fluid name. It could just kind of go into everything because I love Mega Man, but it's not exactly big mainstream, so not many people know what it is. So it's more associated with me. Like if you Google Protoman, you'll get the Mega Man character, but you also get me. So it works out. Nice balance.
So anyway, they can check you out on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and your website. Mm-hmm. And for everybody who's watching, if you have any comments or questions, please go ahead and post those. Thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe.